ourselves in justice and action, and it's not enough to aim for green, but we need solutions that are rooted in fairness, in dignity, and lived reality. So you will hear from frontline leaders today, tomorrow, and the day after, from also grassroots advocates and project teams like us today here from IUCN, who are doing exactly that I said before, building climate and nature solutions that center peoples and rights. And before we go into the different sessions that we will have today, I would like to introduce you like who we are, who is the team behind the scenes of this 3-day symposium. So the symposium is a collaboration between the NAbSA, the Global EbA Fund, the PODONG Indigenous Peoples Initiative, and the RISE teams. You can reach any of us using the emails listed here if you would like to connect after the sessions. So we are a whole team here behind. It is not only me today welcoming you to the symposium, but we are 4 teams behind. So by the way, my name is Veronica Ruiz. I'm the program manager for resilience as part of the climate change and energy transition for IUCN. Along with me today, we have my colleague Rose Washington, who is program officer, also as part of the same team, and she will be co-hosting today alongside with me. Together, we will guide you through today's sessions and keep us on time too, very important. Most importantly is to make a space for reflections, for sharing, for discussing that matters most. So next, I would like to show you a little bit of the agenda for the next 3 days, very briefly. First, we will hear from, of course, very importantly today, we will hear from our keynote speakers. We have with us Stewart McGuinness and Lucy Mulenke, and then we will follow a rich panel conversation on what it means to move beyond green. Later, we will dive into real-world projects. It will be a project showcase across the 4 projects initiative I mentioned before, NAbSA, RISE, PODONG, and the Global EbA Fund. And later, we will showcase all these actions from the ground, real case studies that connect climate, gender, and human rights. And we will end up with a moment to reflect and take it all in. But very important, another important point is some housekeeping rules and also some instructions for you join us online. So please, any question you may have, any comment, use the Q&A box to share your question with the speakers. We will try to get as many as we can. We will be monitoring the chats all the time, and please share your thoughts, any interesting links and reflections. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, we have interpretation. Sorry for the interpreters for speaking so fast. So interpretation is available both in French and Spanish. And finally, we are also live streaming via YouTube, so you can join anytime. You can share with your colleagues or anyone interested. We are live streaming in the IUCN YouTube channel. And during the 3 days, we are very lucky to have with us Maria Fulquet. She will be live drawing all the sessions. And by the end of the day, we will have a very creative way of wrapping up each day. And another point for all of you who would like to share a message of hope or whatever comes to your mind, we will put here in the chat a link to a mural where you can leave your post-it in there and then just leave a message. You put your name, put the organization you work with, and then we will see by the end of the week how many of those post-it messages we have received. So to officially open this 3-day symposium, we are delighted to be joined by 2 incredible leaders and great colleagues too. Stewart McGuinness is our IUCN Deputy Director General for Program, and Lucy Mulenke, who is the Executive Director of the Indigenous Information Network and also co-chair of the IFV and one of the indigenous leaders worldwide. So they will set up the stage for this work, for why we need this work at the intersection of nature, climate, gender, and indigenous peoples. it's more important than ever that we tackle this intersection. So with no further delays, so Stuart, please, over to you for the opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Veronica, and good afternoon, colleagues and friends. I hardly need to tell you that our planet is facing a convergence of crises: climate instability, biodiversity loss, land degradation, and critically deepening social inequalities. The answers we need will not come from isolated disciplines or siloed institutions. Rather, we're gathered here because we recognize something essential. At the heart of the climate-nature-people nexus lies a well of knowledge, experience, and governance carried for generations by Indigenous peoples and local communities. This is not just about conservation or climate resilience. It's about gender justice, equity, and collective action. Indigenous knowledge is not just ancient. It's alive, evolving, and rooted in land, water, skies, kinship, and care. These knowledge systems include gendered roles and insights where Indigenous women, elders, youth are vital actors in shaping and sustaining ecosystems. At IUCN, our work is grounded in one truth: nature and people are one. Our survival is tied to the ecosystems we depend on. Indigenous people have always known this. They have stewarded land long before conservation became a term. Their governance system, based on respect, reciprocity, foresight, shows us what resilience looks like. But let's be clear, this wisdom has for far too long been ignored or marginalized in the global policy space. Indigenous peoples, and especially Indigenous women, have been excluded from the very decisions that affect their lives, lands, and futures. This has to change. The future of climate and nature action depends on the empowerment of Indigenous peoples and local communities. That includes land rights and legal recognition, respect for self-determination, support for Indigenous-led climate and conservation initiatives, and full gender inclusion where women lead as equal partners. IUCN has long recognised the critical contributions of Indigenous leadership and local community stewardship. But these are not side stories. They are central to solving the climate and biodiversity crisis. But solutions are only possible if we elevate Indigenous knowledge, not just recognise it. We must be integrated into this. Indigenous knowledge must be integrated into laws, funding systems, policy frameworks, and international climate negotiations. For the next 3 days, you will hear from Indigenous leaders, practitioners, and other actors who are not only preserving ecosystems, but creating new pathways for resilience and self-determination. You will hear how governments can help amplify these efforts. And finally, and crucially, we will consider, based on first-hand accounts of local leaders and practitioners, why any credible vision of a sustainable future must not only recognise and respect the rights of local communities and Indigenous peoples, but go further to embrace and give support to the agency of local women and men and recognise their stewardship over natural resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for this powerful message. And I think it's very important what you pointed is gender is not only about women. This is a society, let's say, matter that we have to deal with. This about women, it's about men, it's about children, it's about youth. So thank you so much for that. And please, Lucy, go ahead, please, and share with us your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Veronica, and thank you, Stuart, for opening with very important messages. And I must say that I thank IUCN very much for this particular meeting and all the partners that have been involved, because there is quite some partners and we really thank them. And it's really wonderful that this particular theme of the meeting, Nature, Climate, Gender Symposium, has been looked very keenly. I think, Veronica, when you were selecting the discussion topics and everything, were inclusive and were really bringing people together to be able to look at what they've already done and what they are doing and how they can do it even better. And indeed, as Stewart has indicated, we need to look further and see how we can be able to link and work together and see the strength and the weaknesses that we have. I am very happy also to see that at least there will be quite a number of discussions and a selection of very good participation of different people. And I'm really glad that also the Indigenous peoples issues are coming in. Coming from the Indigenous peoples, cluster, we look at how much we have been working together, really linking and trying to discuss as many topics as possible, not only at the international level, but at the regional, national, and international level. And this has helped us because Indigenous people themselves, their science, nature to them is very crucial. And looking at nature, traditional knowledge, and our way of life has been intertwined together. And this is what we want to keep on discussing and looking at those nature and looking at the solutions that we can come up with to also be able to help the science. It's also very important to note that Indigenous people have been actually working in terms of looking at the different topics that we are discussing today. And it will be good that we have also government coming in and other key players to be able to link them. Because I think what normally really misses out is the question of linkages and intergenerational to look at how things can be all put together. The Indigenous people have been, and the Indigenous women in particular, have also been contributing a lot to policy formulation. And the good examples that we have even tried to move further to involve more and more people is our initiative of the PODONG, where we have looked at PODONG as an initiative that we can be able to advance our work, to try and fundraise and to try to work together and put a basket that we can in future and look at it and always be our indicator in the different work that we do. And indeed, it's going to make us even more, many more people recognize the work we do. And we are very proud to be, working in partnership with IUCN and other partners to look at that. And looking at the role of gender has really brought up quite a very impressive and very good way that we've been looking at the Podong and working with the communities at the at the community level. And we want to look and move forward and look at the different topics that you have here and listen carefully and share and link as we've already indicated and see how we can bring our own issues to really come with very important recommendations that we can be able to carry forward to the different forums that are going to be ahead of us in the coming years. Our rural women in the globally, in Asia, in Africa, in many other parts, and our rural elders and youth and others are also very key in terms of looking at that. And we don't want anyone to work in isolation. The way we have put in issues of human rights-based approach is very crucial because that ensures that there will be no one being left behind. I think we can also be very keen in terms of coming up with a very good recommendation, and the work must continue. We must continue working together, Indigenous people, key players, and also the government, so that we can be able to come up with a important recognition and recognizing the rights of Indigenous people wherever they are and whatever work they do. And we look forward for this. We look forward for the 3 days, and the best we could do is really wish you well, and we'll continue with the meeting and also continue following it up and see how much we can be able to pick as much as possible. So I really want to look at it as a collective action, linking and learning together, sharing, and also carrying what we can and taking it back to where we have come from, so that this can be something that we can always remember that this nexus we are discussing in this symposium is very crucial, and it should be something that can continue on as much as we can continue be able to contribute. Thank you very much, and I wish everyone for the 3 days. Don't move away from this computer whenever you are, wherever you are. Make sure the 3 days you really attend and carry as much and come back and share with us wherever we are. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lucy. It's not me who said, Lucy said, don't move from in front of your screen, just stay, take your computer wherever you go. But thank you so much, Lucy. You couldn't say it better. Your points you have said that not to work in isolation. We always say about breaking the silos, but let's do it, and let's do it together. Because what we need is collective action. We cannot keep embracing the fact of, we are very comfortable in our silos. It's not working. We have seen this is not working. We have to come up with collective actions and with actions that are made thanks to co-creation, co-development, and co-collaboration. So also thank you for bringing into this day one the PODONG initiative. So we are very happy to have this initiative up and running for the next year. And tomorrow we will hear a bit more about this initiative with some news, but I will keep the secret for tomorrow. So then you will remain with us until tomorrow. But thank you so much to you, Lucy. Thank you so much to you also, Stuart, for opening this 3 days symposium full of discussion, sharing, and exchanging. And I'm delighted now to go back again to my colleague Rose Washington, because she will be the one guiding you through the next sessions. So I will hand over to her. She will introduce you more in detail what you can expect of today's day one of this symposium. And I really do thank you for being with us. I cannot see how many people we are connected right now, but we had over 800 people registered, and we have other ones joining us in live in the IUCN YouTube channel. So thank you so much to all of you, and over to you, Rose.
Thank you so much, Veronica, and profound thank you again also from my end to Stuart and Lucy for their impactful opening remarks. So before we proceed, allow me to briefly remind you of today's agenda, and I won't go into depth. Veronica has already shown an outline of the agenda. So we will continue with session 1, focusing on a justice-based vision for climate and nature. It is my very pleasure to introduce you to our esteemed moderator for this crucial discussion, Ali Raza Rizvi, head of IUCN's Global Climate Change and Energy Transition team. And I'm delighted to welcome you, Ali, to the session, and hand over to you.
Thank you, Rose. Great to be here. And then listening to Stuart and Lucy, it's really great that we need to go beyond, having our only work which we are doing and focusing on that. We need to break silos and have an integrated approach. So let's start with the first session. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I see from Nepal, Australia, others, people are there quite late in the day. So thank you for being with us. So welcome to the session 1. Beyond Green, a justice-based vision for climate and nature. As Rose introduced me, I'm Aliza Rizvi. I'm heading the climate change and transition team, as well as acting head of human rights and conservation. And I'm honored to be here with you today. The first session sets a vital tone for our symposium. So we aim to move beyond conventional narratives that often focus solely on conservation or carbon markets. Instead, we will center justice-driven approaches that intrinsically link ecological integrity with social equity. We have a remarkable panel of key thinkers, grassroots organizers, and community leaders with us today, each bringing invaluable perspective to this conversation. It's my pleasure to introduce them to you. First, we have Saraika Nantanena. Saraika is the Executive Director of Capacity Building for Communities, as it's an NGO, C for C, focused on empowerment and systemic change. She specializes in gender inclusion, positive masculinity, and women's empowerment with a growing dedication to integrating climate justice and ocean advocacy into her work. And then we have Vivania Figurova. Vivania, an Indigenous woman in the Global Technical Coordinator of the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. She brings over 20 years of expertise in traditional knowledge, Indigenous people's rights, and women's empowerment, with a focus on biodiversity and the negotiation of traditional knowledge at the international level. And then we have Mary Ruth Preby. She's the co-founder and COO of Accelerate, which implements women, peace, and security initiatives across the Indo-Pacific. Her expertise lies in connecting defense policy with community-level practical implementation, particularly at the intersection of gender and climate security, and centering local women expertise to address structural causes. And then we also have, I believe, do we have other colleagues also here?
Ali, he's having some technical issues to connect, but no worries, he will be joining us shortly.
I see. Okay. And I was also initially wondering, we had another speaker, no? That's all?
Yes, so we have Onel Mazardule Herrera, who is joining us, but he's having some technical issues. So please, we are.
Thank you. So our discussion today will explore climate action must be rooted in lived realities of frontline communities and challenges the very system that perpetuate marginalization. We will aim to reframe dominant narrative, explore actionable alternatives, amplify community voices, and work towards dismantling systematic barriers to justice. But at the same time, I was wondering, Barbara is with us, I believe, no? Barbara, are you here with us?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Sorry, I initially was looking at the updated list. So there's some technical glitch there, but that's fine. So we will move forward. Barbara has both local and international and regional expertise, was working with IUCN, now with WWF, and looking into, decolonizing overall programs, and then looking into how we can have integrated approaches towards carbon as well as conservation. To kickstart, let's start with a broad question. What does a justice-based vision of climate and nature truly looks like in practice from the perspective? So let's go into that, keeping that in mind, and you will have 3 to 4 minutes to answer. Saraika, let's start with you. What are the key challenges in defining and implementing climate justice at the community level, and how can best practices in capacity building overcome these hurdles? So Saraika, over to you.
Thank you very much. I am going to continue in French. Alors, merci beaucoup et merci beaucoup aussi à mes collègues qui travaillent sur le projet RICI à Madagascar qui a préparé la présentation aujourd'hui avec moi. Alors,
thanks very much to my colleagues who are work so hard on the preparation of this position I'm going to share with you. I think the challenge when we speak about climate and climate justice is mainly got to do with the fact that we do not really touch on the deeper causes of climate change. Climate change is not just limited to environmental issues, but is linked to an exploitation and oppression system which is perpetrated in our society. So as a feminist organization and as an organization which is active side by side the communities, climate justice demands from us a transformation of our relationships, something which is not always happening. Women's participation is not always present. Traditional communities are still marginalized. They do not have decision-making power. So I believe these are the true challenges we've got to face. And that's the reason why I believe it is so important to approach them from a practical point of view. And that's why our project is focusing on these. In our project, we want to create an articulation of the planet, people, and systems so we can achieve political change and also deploy a focal point which goes beyond everything which has got to do with the environment. We want to deploy a humanistic approach, an approach which places human beings before anything else while reflecting on the problems of peoples, of women, and which generates solutions for these problems. Also, solutions which are also climate oriented, socially oriented solutions. Solutions which benefit everyone and not just a few. And solutions which also place women before everything else while fighting against discrimination. As I said before, the problem with climate justice is not only an environmental problem, but also a social and political problem. And I believe that's the reason why highlighting best practices in the fight against climate change entails taking into account both the planet and its people and everything affecting the people in the planet. And having this in mind, there's a need to develop innovative solutions which bring us on to knowing that when we place human beings in the focal point, innovative solutions are generated, as it was highlighted during the initial speech. Indigenous peoples have a know-how which can be used. All these community know-how should be used. And in order to use it, we've got to place human beings at that center as the focal point of attention. And that's everything on my side. I believe this to be the most important perspective. We've got to approach a holistic, integrative perspective when we speak of climate justice, because it's not just an issue of approaching the problems of the environment, things such as temperature or of forests, but rather take into account a more holistic approach.
Thank you. Now let's go to Viviania. Over to you. Okay, what are the contribution of traditional knowledge of indigenous people to biodiversity conservation and climate action? What's the role of indigenous women? So over to you.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much. Thanks to you all. It's a great honor to be here with you all. Some 30 years ago, traditional knowledge of local communities, indigenous people, especially traditional knowledge of women, was not taken into account as a valid form of knowledge. And even today, there are some schools of thought that believe that that knowledge is kind of a vulgar, mundane knowledge, which is still waiting for validation. But traditional knowledge is now achieved global recognition. For example, the global report by the IPBS, the global report on the state of biodiversity, acknowledges the contribution of the traditional knowledge of indigenous people, especially of women, to the preservation of biodiversity and the alleviation of climate change. So that's why this is a fundamental subject for us, especially if we want climate justice to go beyond the mere contents of speeches. So the role of local communities and indigenous peoples is recognized. Also, the knowledge and all that is pouring in climate action policies. But there are only a few countries which recognize the role of this knowledge. There are no policies promoting the transfer of this knowledge. No, there are policies for the preservation of them. And it's a knowledge which is usually transferred in indigenous languages which are also perishing. And there's no environment for children and young people to learn that knowledge. So climate justice should be active in that sense, because indigenous peoples, especially indigenous women, are the ones which are most intensively affected by the loss of biodiversity. So the central axis should be centered around traditional knowledge. Thank you, Viviana.
Women's role in all this. So let's now go to Barbara. With your experience working at the local, regional, and global levels to shape inclusive and just conservation, what do you consider as the strides we have made, and what are still the bottlenecks? Over to you, Barbara.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ali. Yes, indeed. I'm really glad that we are at this current time, we have better recognition that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we have really, the Indigenous Peoples Movement has been very, fundamental in really getting, voices of Indigenous people recognized in the global scale. We have a recognition that the climate change is no longer just an environmental issue, but a gender issue, an inequality issue, etc., etc. And at global level, there's a very good recognition of that. However, I was in Uganda last year, and I just came back from the Netherlands, coordinating the project called Voices for Just Climate Action. And I went home, and I talked to 3 very prominent women organizations that are working on gender issues for a long time, over 30 years. There's one called Forum for Women in Democracy. It has been instrumental in supporting women get into leadership, in supporting women's income equality, etc. However, when I talk to them about any programming around climate change, they're like, but that's an environmental issue. What can we do with tree planting? And I was like, there's a missing link here. Okay. I met another one, the Forum for Advancing Women in Education. It works with girls and getting them into school. It's very, very prominent organization in Uganda. It's actually not just Uganda, I think it's Africa. I did talk to them, and they were like, yeah, we are actually struggling with the number of our programs around River Nyamwamba, which floods each year. And instead of working on girls getting into school and etc., we end up working on getting them secured, because often their homes are gone, schools are destroyed, and our centers we often turn into disaster risk rescue. But these schools do not have climate change programming, and they work with all schools in the districts in the region. Okay, so you see that whereas the narrative is right now at the global level, at the regional and local level, there's still a very big gap. Organizations that work on the social sciences, organizations that work on gender inequality, income inequality, are nowhere articulating and integrating the climate through this lens of inequality. Yeah. Indeed, I also went to the Uganda climate change programming, the strategy, and I found that it is housed in the Ministry of Water and Environment. The organizations, UNGENDA or ETC, have nowhere, not even made any effort to integrate climate change issues in their work. And yet, you know very well that climate change is not an event. Most of the effects we suffer right now, the major impacts come from the longer list of the social issues. If I have no land, I'll be worse off. It's just another layer. If I have no food, climate change is going to make it even worse. If you're struggling with water, climate change is going to make it even worse. So I think this is the area that we need to work better, and I don't know how. I know that one of the things that at least I was part of is I was able to work in a program where a conservation organization was partnering with 5 social organizations. So working with Slum Dwellers International, that is so crucial when it comes to managing urban poverty. It's often very fantastic when it comes to, actually it was very instrumental when it comes to the COVID crisis, because there are numbers of people, poor people, where they are, how they're affected with water. Most of slums are in wetlands. They manage wetlands because that's where their water is, but that's where they are also staying. So they are experts in managing urban wetlands and the issues that are there, ecological issues are there. But they look at them from an economic, from a security perspective, and climate change is going to, addressing climate change through these lenses. They're already there, they're experts. And conservation organizations often work in the rural areas, and don't engage in these urban poverty issues. So for me, I think that's what I wanted to share, that we have done very well in getting the climate justice argument and lenses, as Viana said, EbA now recognizes this indigenous knowledge and ETC, but there's still a disconnect, between the levels that we need to work on.
Thank you, Barbara. That's very critical point, as all our speakers are highlighting. We are, changing our narrative. We know what mistakes we are making, but at the same time, business as usual somehow is going on. So it's great that many donors are also part of this symposium, and I hope they are taking notes. That many times, what happens, we learn our lessons, we learn from our mistakes, but then for implementation, project development, and then we are dependent on donors funding. And if that is siloed, whatever we do, whatever even if I say we believe in, okay, this will not work, but we are dependent on those windows. So maybe siloed is not the implementation mechanisms and organization. Donors also need to take this into account and have integrated approaches. But it's great to see that many donors are already have started working on that. But I think we need to have the pace which is as per the problems on ground. So thank you. I'll come back to you on this. So now let's go to, we have Onal Herrera has joined us. Onal is a PODONG ICI Fellow and Project Manager at the Foundation for the Promotion of Indigenous Knowledge. As a young Guna from Panama, he is passionate about preserving and strengthening Guna indigenous knowledge among new generation, focusing on science clubs at USW and UNW schools. So, Onal, have you used your role as a fellow of PODONG Initiative and work at FPCI to strengthen indigenous youth leadership in the face of the climate crisis? So over to you, Onal.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Yo soy el Masabul de pueblo de Podón indígena.
Onal, I'm sorry, we can't hear you properly. Can you speak again? Let's see if without now.
Ahora sí.
Yeah, it's better. Yes, please go on. Yeah.
Ahora sí. Eran los audífonos, ¿ok?
Ahora sí.
Yeah,
Yes,
Hola,
now,
¿qué tal? Muy
it
buenos días.
was the
Yo
headphones.
soy
Good
Onel
morning.
Guillermo
I'm
Sardúez
Onel
Herrera,
Herrera.
Panamá.
I am from Panama.
Como fellow de la iniciativa PODONG y miembro
I'm a member of the PODONG Initiative, a member of the foundation of PCI, which is an indigenous organization. I've worked to raise the voice of our youngsters within our Puna communities. We are concerned about education and also with the science clubs and with the Yando community. There's one of the two Puna communities where the youngsters can learn about their own roots, about their ancestral knowledge, and also about the current scientific knowledge. And we cultivate also the knowledge of science on site, water, forestry, climate, and by doing so, we strengthen a leadership which does not only react to climate change. We work with the knowledge of the different indigenous communities.
Okay, thanks. So again, we'll come back to you on how this, indigenous knowledge and how, can help together with maybe science and data and projections to move forward for effective implementation on ground. So now I come to Mary Ruth, to you. A big argument in a crisis is that, we need to prioritize immediate response over longer term justice concern, because those are termed as, okay, those will take time and let's first respond to a crisis. But how do you respond to this? How can we overcome this and can have integrated approaches even at the crisis level? So over to you, Mary Ruth.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for having me. I think this framing really creates a false choice between speed and effectiveness that creates a lot of problems, especially for women and other vulnerable populations. The evidence really shows that a justice-blind crisis response consistently fails to reach people who need the help most, and then it creates and amplifies vulnerabilities that are already there. So, for instance, when early warning systems exclude women, half the population can get trapped in disaster zones. Or when relief distribution ignores women or gender dynamics, resources don't reach households effectively. Or when recovery planning sidelines women's knowledge, communities rebuild the same vulnerabilities that made them fragile in the first place. So justice isn't really a luxury that we can add after solving the immediate crisis. It's fundamental to effective crisis response. The communities that recover fastest from disasters, I think, are those that harness diverse knowledge, distribute resources equitably, and leverage everyone's capabilities. And that every time we exclude women's leadership in the name of speed, we're actually slowing down our response and guaranteeing that we'll face the same crisis again. So I think the most effective disaster responses, and that's an area that I live in, is to integrate justice from day one, to leverage women's and other vulnerable populations' knowledge of community needs, their networks for resource distribution, and their understanding of local vulnerabilities. And so, this isn't just something that's nice to have. It's a really smart, effective way of approaching these crises. And so I think it needs to be an inclusive, justice-oriented approach from the start.
Ali, you're muted.
Well, thank you for pointing it out. Yeah, we have seen in many disaster responses that, while responding to one issue or something, we create many other issues. And those then come in the way of effective rehabilitation, reconstruction. So that's very critical. And at times we get carried away by a few things and then realize and try to resolve issues which from the first point, if we have integrated approaches, things can be different. So again, we'll come back to you. And for our audience, please do ask questions, put in the chat box. Our colleagues are there who would then sort those questions and then send over to me. So please keep putting your questions in the chat box. Now for, again, coming back to you, Sarika, that building on your insight about challenges and capacity building, what specific mechanisms or partnerships have you seen successfully bridge the gap between community level climate justice aspirations and broader policy or funding frameworks? Because that gap is always there. So is it working, and at what level it's working? What are the preconditions? So over to you, Sarika.
Thank you. Alors, comme a dit notre collègue Barbara tout à l'heure, il y a ce gap entre ce qui se passe au niveau mondial et ce qui se passe au niveau local.
This gap between what happens on a world level and what happens on the local level, I would say that the best practices on finances has to do or is related with having sponsors, financiers, which listen to the local populations and that they create and believe in providing financial resources to local groups, we will be able to achieve a global impact and a global success. So therefore, to provide you with an example, here in Madagascar, who carries out the preservation and conservation of the ecosystem in the fight against climate change, and who does the work of integrating climate justice in the actions against climate change. And the ones who really do so are the small associations, the local associations, youngsters, women associations, and Christian groups, Christian associations, but in any case, small groups, small associations, which carry out a lot of work on a local level. However, this little or small association, they lack the necessary financial means, because the way how you get those financial resources, they impose some conditions which are many times very difficult to comply with by those small associations. We are talking now about those grassroots organizations, small organizations, and it's quite difficult for them. So we have to reflect of how we are able to close this gap between the global level and the local level, so that it somehow is reduced. I like very much how this has been explained and how we collect and gather the know-how of the indigenous people. And I believe this is an integral part of this philosophy, to look and to search for the roots, for those that have the solutions, to be able to have a global or to produce a global impact.
Thank you. Yes, it's very difficult what you're pointing out. No perfect solution, but how we can make financial resources available and address the gaps at the community level. Because, yeah, surely due to due diligence and all the requirements of donors, very difficult to respond by local communities. And that's why this concept of direct financing coming into play, and this is getting popular, maybe that's the way we can work with indigenous people and local communities to have those processes. But again, a lot of work is needed. So thank you for pointing it out. It's a major obstacle where we can have local indigenous knowledge and solutions by them rather than international organizations and outsider coming and telling them to do this. So that's we need to reflect together with donors, communities, and other to shortcut this process or how to make it more effective. Okay, so let's now another question to now Viviana, that considering the tool as framework, what is the biggest challenge for communities to get support for their climate action? So if you can talk about that a bit. Viviana?
Sí.
Yes.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Sí, en este momento,
Yes,
a
currently,
nivel internacional,
on an
se ha
international
avanzado en el
level, there has been
reconocimiento a
advancement in the
derechos y
recognitions of
pueblos
the
indígenas,
rights of the indigenous people,
especialmente hacia su
especially
conocimiento tradicional.
towards their
Esto lo
traditional
evidencia la
knowledge. This
Convención de
can be
Derechos del
clearly
Cambio
seen in
Climático,
the
sobre la
climate change
biodiversidad
framework, the
y
Convention
su
on
marco mundial de
biodiversity,
biodiversidad
and
en
the
Montreal, y el
framework
reciente
on
programa de
biodiversity in
trabajo de
Montreal, and
organizaciones
the quite
internacionales
recent work programs
en el marco
which
del
has
Convenio sobre
adapted the
Biodiversidad
knowledge,
y
the,
también
the native
protocolos de
knowledge and the
negocios y
different
actos de
frameworks,
participación en
and
los beneficios.
also the
Estos
access
instrumentos
the
internacionales
access and
plantean
benefits that
principalmente
the
derechos
native
importantes de los
peoples
pueblos
needs. And
indígenas.
this
La
obviously
primera
brings
es
forward the rights
mantener sus
of
conocimientos
the native people.
tradicionales.
First of all, is to maintain
Segundo
their
es que
traditional
si
knowledge.
alguien
Second is
quiere acceder o
if
utilizar
somebody
esos
wants to get
conocimientos
access or
tradicionales,
use those use their traditional knowledge, should be
sea
based
en
on
base a
respect.
la
It should be
negociación de las
based
condiciones
on
para
on
compartir ese
condition
conocimiento
negotiations and
y
how
sea
this
también en
knowledge is
base
going
a
to
la
be
participación de los
distributed, and also
beneficios que se
based
deriven de la
on the
utilización de ese
participation of the profits and benefits
Este marco
generated by
internacional
that
es
knowledge. This
muy
international
importante
framework is
y
quite
es importante
important,
que se
and it's
implemente a nivel
important that it's
nacional. O
implemented
sea,
also on a
se ha
national
avanzado a nivel
level. There's
internacional,
been an
pero a nivel
advancement
nacional
on an
todavía hay
international level,
gran
but on a
brecha.
national level, there's
Sin
still a
embargo,
large gap
las
open.
comunidades a
However,
nivel
the
en sí,
communities
a nivel local,
on a local
están
level
trabajando en
are
mantener ese
working in
conocimiento tradicional.
maintaining the
Porque
traditional
si ese
knowledge,
conocimiento tradicional se
because
pierde
if
por
this
más
traditional knowledge
regulaciones que
gets lost,
tengamos,
and
va a ser en
independently of
vano.
all the
Por
regulations
eso
that we
es
might
muy
have, that is
importante,
the reason why it's very
que se
important
trabaje en apoyar
that
a los
we
pueblos
work in
indígenas para la
supporting the
implementación
indigenous people
nacional de estas
in order to
normativas
implement this
internacionales que han
international
sido
regulations in
adoptadas,
the
que hay
national
un
legislative
compromiso
framework,
internacional,
to tell
que
them it
hay un
has been
compromiso
adopted.
de
There's an
cada uno de
international
los
commitment.
países
There's a
de
commitment of
llevarlo a su
each and every
territorio,
single
que
country
se avance de una manera
to
más
implement
rápida y
it in the
más
country to
efectiva.
advance faster and a more efficient and a more effective way. Thank you very much.
Hello. Yeah, okay, now there's no echo. So yeah, awareness raising with communities and other, that's so critical. And, it's not, indigenous people and community, but overall people don't recognize, as you're saying, climate change. So we need to, talk in their language in that way, ki what they speak, not this jargons and other, ki how livelihoods getting changed, how new diseases are coming in and all those. So that's very good point, that how we can make it more of a movement and align with empowerment, youth and women and other. They come together, and only then perhaps we will go in a realistic way forward, things which are very relevant to local communities and other, rather than just so global agenda needs to look into local realities and empower people. So thank you, Vivania, for this piece of advice based on your work. Now let's go to you, Barbara. Given that this way forward for international NGOs and indigenous people, how can we foster true power sharing and co-creation? Similar point what Viviana was saying, we need to bring global into local and action. So how can we co-create, initiative, both conservation and climate, and moving beyond more, just consultation with the local people? That means going over there, tick marking few points on a checklist. So what's your views on that, and what's your advice based on your experiences?
Thank you again. I think we're already having very good examples like Podong. It's one of those. But let me just say, last month we had the first Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Congress on Africa. It was in the Republic of Congo. And it was really amazing to see that there's been already very good examples and evidence of direct financing that is happening. Indigenous people in Latin America have created platforms, institutions that can receive direct financing. Similarly, in Asia, less so in Africa. But the issue is, and okay, last week also, last month, what we also saw was the World Bank proposing this new initiative, the TFF, the Tropical Forest Forever Facility, that is about 125 billion, and was being introduced at this Congress. Now, what was amazing, and as I think what we should continue doing, is the World Bank proposes this, but the indigenous people and local communities took a lot of time discussing this initiative and proposing how it should be designed and support them for them to legitimize it. That's, I think, for me, was a fantastic model of where I saw networks, because there's already formation of these networks that are important, which they should grow, but networks with power to be able to demand and require, big organizations, international organizations, or to really walk the talk. Otherwise, for a long time, this has been the argument. You need to do this, you need to do this, but without requiring them with accountability, it hasn't been happening. Now, with such a forum where indigenous people and local communities are able to organize and speak collectively with a voice, with clear demands, you could see that, for example, at the event last month, the ask was that the TFF would provide 20% to local people and indigenous communities. And they said, no, let's think about 40%, because most of the resources that this initiative is supposed to leverage are in indigenous people's lands already, so that's already their power. So I think it's the time. We are within the times where we are shifting collaboration from being just like international organizations, being a conduit of funds to transfer, to being partners where we approach donors, we approach funders as equal parties, and where accountability for that funding can really be traced. And I think right now, all the conditions are in place. We have the digital age where everything can be tracked. We are in, with a network where indigenous networks and local communities networks have organized and can really work closely. But also you could still see that, yes, whereas indigenous networks, local communities networks are organizing, there's still so many and numerous and onerous for donors to really get to them individually. So this is where the value then of international organizations is to facilitate, enable, and like I said, an example of the Podong, there are many like this that are growing, and we should really encourage them and support and amplify this work.
Thank you, Barbara. This aspect of, direct financing could be one solution along with integrated approaches. And yeah, we have seen that Jeff and now Canada government through Podong and World Bank, as you shared. So more and more donors are thinking about it and executing it. The challenge would be to make it effective, working with communities, and maybe a longer term duration, not a very short term, because at times capacity building of local communities, indigenous people takes time. So it should be a lot thought through, and consultative processes will help us in developing effective mechanisms also for better implementation together with direct financing, because I can see that could become one challenge and people might go back to the business as usual approaches. So thank you for this. Now I come to you, Anil. So have the spaces such as the ICI initiative allowed you to connect local struggle with global indigenous communities and climate justice networks? How these networks getting more and more effective? What are your experiences?
En los clubes de ciencias que
In the science
facilitamos las
clubs
comunidades de
that
plurigeneralidad,
we have in our
el respeto al
communities,
conocimiento indígena se convierte en una acción
the
climática
indigenous knowledge turns into a specific climate action. The Kuna youth is very deep rooted with the land in our countries. We are not only talking about climate change, we also go on site, we look at the crops, we look at also the natural cycle, we work with volunteers. We also work with the Amila, such as Amila communities, where they work with the turtles. They study and another islands, which is called Masariandu, in which we monitorize the carey turtles. I do understand the importance and the participation of all those groups. We also clean the beaches of plastics, cans, etc. And we work with the ancestral knowledge, and we indigenous people, we also try to raise awareness and to take action facing this crisis, this climate crisis.
Okay. Thanks for giving these examples of beach cleanup, glass recycling in Kuna territory, and raising awareness against climate change. So these are the examples which will strengthen the work what we are trying to do, and then go through networks and working with youth and empowerment. So thank you, Onel, for sharing these. Now I come back to you, Mary Ruth. Following your argument of integrating long-term justice into immediate crisis response, how can we effectively measure and communicate long-term benefits of such integrated approaches? Because when you measure, then you can share the data and then make an, again, powerful argument through case studies and demonstrate that the strategic advantage of prioritizing justice even in moments of urgency, that will help us to mainstream it further. So over to you, Mary Ruth.
So the question is how to effectively measure and
document and share. Yeah.
Yeah. So this might be a somewhat uncomfortable conversation, but the work that I do specifically is with defense and security forces in the Asia Pacific region, where I work with militaries essentially that are responding to disasters and environmental insecurities. And so I think in terms of my work and measuring and tracking these sorts of things, there needs to be a fundamental shift in how we approach disaster response in terms of military involvement. And militaries do have unique capabilities. They bring rapid mobilization, logistics, specialized equipment, and those types of things. So I think we need them in our disaster responses, but unfortunately, they are very much focused on the immediate and the short term. in terms of their effectiveness and the impact that they're having. And so working with these particulars within these particular structures in order to integrate longer term thinking, there needs to be a lot more training in these military contexts in order to give them the skills for gender analysis and how to engage communities ahead of time, and then give them these core competencies that allow them to see gender within a disaster response in the moment, in an emergency, so that they are better able to integrate these things right when we need them the most. And then I think in terms of measuring humanitarian success, we need to think not just in terms of resources distributed or crises prevented, but local capacity strengthening and leadership development as well. I think as well, direct climate adaptation funding needs to be given at a community level in order to effectuate some of these longer term things, and then empower those community-led initiatives to do the measurement, the determining what needs to be measured, and then building the structures for measurement and response from there. And then we need to also think about tracking community adaptive capacity alongside things like military readiness. And these types of things generally they don't talk to each other. So community resilience doesn't necessarily talk to military readiness, but because these actors are both in these spaces in disaster response, I think they need to be talking more and developing shared metrics for the various areas that we need to be measuring. So, and this could include things like measuring women's participation, decision-making, evaluating integration of traditional knowledge in informal planning, and assessing whether climate interventions strengthen or weaken social cohesion and justice. So it's not just about making these current systems more inclusive, but it's about building entirely new approaches that recognize that communities closest to the problem hold the keys to our climate resilience, and that they need to be involved from the start in the measurement and evaluation as well.
Thank you, Mary Ruth. Very critical points that all this, once documented in other, should contribute towards local institutions strengthening and building rather than creating a dependency syndrome. And at the same time, we have seen that, disaster response gets a lot more, up to 80 to 90% more resources than disaster preparedness. So that's again something our donors and others, they need to take into account, that if you prepare them, as you're saying, through building local capacities, prepare them, integrate from the very beginning, then the rush through implementation, we can get out of that and be better prepared. So those things, again, a whole mindset needs to be changed, and response and other. But again, it's difficult because at times, we all humans and other, the emotional response after a disaster generates a lot more resources than anticipating disaster. We all want to ignore, like humans, okay, nothing bad will happen. And then we don't prepare for things. So that's why these aspects, insurance and other aspects, should come into play. Only then we will be effective in our disaster response, which could be integrated. Thank you, Mary Ruth. So we have some time now for questions to our panelists, I think, but I will share some of the questions, and then if you all can pick one which relates to you more, and then we will have, so I will share some of the questions which came in the chat. For example, one, Catalina Mora is asking, how can we ensure that we are not only advocating for inclusion and equity externally, but also actively embodying these principles internally? So maybe, how in organizations, are we walking the talk, or we are just sermonizing the rest of the world and not practicing it at internal level? So maybe our colleagues who are at the organization level, maybe Barbara, you can respond to this. And then another question is from Violet asking, how can we raise awareness about climate change in the community? It's not just the indigenous community, but also parts of the community, as you say, urban level. Not all people recognize climate change impacts. So maybe our colleagues working at the indigenous community and other, how that you all alluded also to through your intervention. And then there's another question. Let me just go there. Yeah, again, okay, there are international advances in all these discussions and other, but still there are gaps at the local level. How can we work towards that? And then also, how can we raise awareness about at the community level? Again, the same questions came on. Yeah, so entirely up to you. Okay, how would you like to respond to these? Yeah, so let's start with you, Barbara, maybe at internal level.
Yes, that's a really, really good question, because that's the only way we can really sustain achieving inclusive conservation. And the question was, how can we ensure that we are not only talking about it, we are actually walking the talk? I think ensuring it, for me, is the most important way to ensure this happens is by donors and local communities. With this digital age, if the donors require it, then the implementers will have no choice. If the local communities require it and follow up and demand, because that honestly, advising and requiring people to do things, it's sometimes people fall back to things that are easy. Inclusion and equity are not easy things. They're difficult things for organizations. They're expensive things. But if it's a requirement from accountability from the local people themselves and from donors, that's the best way you can ensure that. Having said that, also, I think right now for me, this is my interest, my activism. I choose to work inside international organizations to support this to work. And what I've seen is that there's a big shift now. We are having more social scientists being recruited by international organizations to require this. To do, for example, I'm implementing a project right now that is in 5 countries with WWF, but I've proposed and I think agreed that 50 or 40% of the funding of this project should go directly to the local communities where we are working. Yeah, so that's why I was in Republic of Congo last month, and I had the opportunity to attend the summit. And it's because the community we are working with, all the 53 villages, will get 40%, $400,000. 40% of this budget will have to go directly, and we are negotiating how. These institutions don't have, this community doesn't yet have, a good, clear mechanism of the flow. But that's a good thing now with the donor, because the donor is patient. Ali, to your point, agreeing to patient long-term financing would allow these processes to work. Otherwise, when it's short-term, then organizations make shortcuts. It is, even if the intention is right. Yeah. So for me, those are the fundamental ones: a requirement by the donor, providing the conditions to allow this to happen, but also accountability that is really, really strong. Would be the way to go.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. So that was the question also from Violet, that how can we make institutions accountable? So your last point on that. Anyone else want to come on this? How can we make international institutions or organizations accountable for this integration approaches? Any other comment? Yeah, Viviana?
Sí, creo que es importante en sí, o sea, el sistema
Well, I
de
believe
financiamiento
that the
ha sido
financing system
establecido
was established for international organizations, also for the countries. So, of course, it's a bit complex to deal with the system. And what's most important is to design a system which facilitates financing for indigenous peoples, which is what we are working on in PODONG. So communities do not have, for example, a community where they are making contribution, where, for example, they work with their manpower, that's also taken into account. When the community is contributing with their time, with collective work, community work, that's also taken into account. When the community makes decisions in a collective fashion, those decision-making processes, which are much more complex, which take longer, and when a decision is made at the NGO, they are considered, they are taken into account. So I believe that's the challenge. How through experience we can create an effective support for communities which are preserving biodiversity and working in the fight against climate change, following the implementation comments made by Barbara.
They need to be improved. You're right. Unless we recognize indigenous knowledge and their contribution towards environment, climate, not just as to receive things, but also as agent of change, as they say, only then. So system change is required, not just here and there anecdotal examples of we are working and all that. So that's critical. Other thoughts on these points: accountability, awareness at community level, how to others. So if 1 minute each, other colleagues can come in. Siriaka, you?
Yes, thank you. I will answer to the question, how can we raise our awareness in the community? And I think to raise awareness, we need examples. We need role models. Like we cannot change people. We can just propose them what are the alternatives, and we can also like to demonstrate the change we want. We cannot change people. People change by themselves. If they are convinced of what we are saying, they will change. And about climate change, people do not really understand why do we need to work on the climate? Why do we need to work on women for that? Why we talk about climate justice? So to raise awareness, we really need to influence the change, and by examples, by having role models, and by walking the talk as well. Like if I am leading that NGO here in Madagascar, and we go to the community to tell them to protect the environment, so all the staff of the NGO should also prevent the environment at their house, at school, at the university, wherever we are going. That's the example we need to do. And we need to prove the community that what we are saying is the best way to do things and it works. And if people are convinced, they will change. That's the only way. Like for example, if you tell someone stop smoking, it won't work. How can people who have smoked for 10 years and you say stop smoking? Oh, you say, oh, you crazy. How can I stop smoking? But if you arrive to really prove, and if he tried also to stop the smoke and he feels the goodness and the well-being of not smoking, so that person will stop smoking. That's about community. It's all about human. We don't go if we are not convinced. So that's the key. Thank you.
So important that unless and until it becomes part of our, the thinking process, it's not just the head, it also the heart. When you accept it, only then we change. Otherwise, all the science and tools and everything, even the, if I could use this word, holy books and other, even if we believe, we don't practice. Because for us, some benefits which are immediate comes first and then we change. So it's a very difficult, a very challenging thing. Okay, by just informing people will change. That's not what we observe. So we need to practice it, we need to showcase, and then also we need to demonstrate that there are benefits and which could be immediate. Any last words from you, Honor? Or as Honor is looking, I believe, you coming in, or maybe for the time being, let's go to Mary Ruth. Your any last message?
Yeah, I would I go to the same question in terms of thinking about how do we raise awareness within communities. This is something that I think about a lot, and the central challenge is that this is almost like it's a one by one process in many ways, and it requires the sort of person to person sharing of knowledge and information. And so I think some of the most effective ways to do this is through cross training programs across industries and sectors. And so for me, that involves bringing civil society into defense and security spaces, which is very different and often challenging for those people to come together. But I think it's important for sharing knowledge about how to address things like disasters and how we respond to them and how we can integrate communities' needs. But that also is a way of raising awareness about what happens within communities after a disaster. And so I think there's this cross-training element that's really important. I think there needs to be more real-time coordination systems, and this is a huge challenge within the disaster response space. But I think with real-time coordination, we can be better able to respond to these things with individualized, community needs taken into consideration. And so that again requires a lot of long-term planning ahead of time, which requires raising awareness. So I think all of those things are linked. And then I think having community-based networks is the other, that's sort of like cross-training, but these networks are important for spreading knowledge and awareness of Indigenous or women's expertise in these areas so that we can share the information. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ruth. As we are almost at the end of the session, so, there are some questions in the chat. So we will be putting a mural, and I would request all our panelists that if they can have, look at the questions, and also if they want to put some responses in the mural, there would be a link here, and our colleagues will again put that in the chat box. So that will be very helpful because we would develop a whole report around this symposium. So thank you so much for your incredible, input and insights and sharing. So Sarika, Viviana, Barbara, Onel, and Mary Ruth, thanks a lot. And now I hand back to you, Rose. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali. And also thank you very much to our incredible panelists today for sharing their insightful perspectives and experiences. This session has presented compelling arguments for moving beyond the concept of green and adopting a justice-based approach to climate and nature for achieving holistic and sustainable change. And with this, we would like to showcase an inspiring video from our NAbSA project partners, the World University Service of Canada, to conclude this session.
Le projet d'adaptation climatique basé sur la nature dans la forêt guinéenne d'Afrique de l'Ouest est un projet qui favorise l'implication des femmes dans le processus d'adaptation climatique. Les femmes constituent la catégorie sociale qui est le plus impactée par les effets du changement climatique. Par ailleurs, ces femmes vivent de la nature parce qu'elles sont des agricultrices et elles peuvent être, dans le contexte de l'adaptation climatique, les actrices clés pour la protection de l'environnement. L'objectif en termes d'EFH est d'amener des changements visibles dans le domaine de la gouvernance locale qui intègre les questions en lien avec la participation et l'implication des femmes dans les mécanismes d'adaptation climatique et de gouvernance locale. C'est de favoriser en fait la prise en compte des besoins spécifiques des femmes, les besoins prioritaires des femmes dans les outils de gouvernance locale.
Pour y arriver, nous allons améliorer la compétence du leadership des femmes. Ensuite, nous allons faire un vaste programme de reboisement suivi de beaucoup d'autres activités de sensibilisation et de formation. Et nous développerons un système de marché qui va concerner d'abord l'identification du système de marché existant et le renforcement de ce qui existe tout en introduisant de nouveaux éléments. Le projet d'adaptation climatique basé sur la nature dans les forêts guinéennes d'Afrique de l'Ouest est un projet qui travaille en Guinée, au Ghana et en Côte d'Ivoire. Ça permet une coopération sous-régionale entre les différentes institutions et les différents acteurs y intervenants. Et ça permet de mettre en place une synergie d'action dans le cadre du changement climatique de façon spécifique pour chaque pays et de façon globale pour les 3 pays.
Les femmes dans ces communautés, dans les communautés où nous allons intervenir, sont des femmes qui interviennent dans le domaine agricole et plus particulièrement dans le domaine maraîcher. Malheureusement, elles sont limitées du point de vue des bonnes techniques culturelles, du point de vue de la gestion des ressources qu'elles génèrent et aussi impactées par les changements climatiques qui affectent leur culture.
L'attente par rapport à ce projet, c'est qu'à la fin, qu'il y ait beaucoup plus d'implication des femmes dans le développement de la communauté, de façon globale et de façon spécifique dans la lutte contre le changement climatique.
Les solutions fondées sur la nature, c'est vraiment un mécanisme qui permettra aux communautés en général, aux femmes en particulier, de jouir des bienfaits de la biodiversité et en même temps de protéger cette biodiversité.
Je fais face aux défis des changements climatiques quotidiennement, comme de nombreuses femmes dans la région. Le manque d'eau, les difficultés d'accès aux intrants agricoles sont des problèmes constants. J'espère que le projet Forêt guinéenne pourra fournir un soutien crucial pour surmonter ces obstacles, ce qui pourrait améliorer nos conditions de vie et augmenter nos revenus.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for sharing the video. As we move forward, we will now transition into our next segment, session 2, which is titled Project Showcase, Climate Agenda and Human Rights in Action. And to guide us through this exciting session, it is my very pleasure to introduce Kalama Hate, IUCN's Country Program Manager for Mozambique, who will serve as our moderator for this session. Carla, welcome. The stage is yours.
Hi, thank you, Rose. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining from. And welcome to the section 2 of Nature, Climate and Gender Symposium Project Showcase on Climate, Gender and Human Rights in Actions. My name is Carla Majata. I'm IUCN's Country Program Manager for Mozambique, and I'm pleased to be your moderator for this crucial discussion today. So this second session, we turn on the real-world work of communities and organizations that are implementing nature-based solutions that place gender equality and human rights at the center. These stories are not only inspiring, but also instructive, providing practical lessons that others can adapt and build upon. So in this session, we will explore a range of community-led and right-based nature and climate initiatives, reflect on how inclusive design and local leadership shape outcomes, identify both barriers and breakthroughs in implementation, as well as draw out lessons that can inform similar efforts around the world. So now let me briefly introduce our inspiring project leaders and community representatives who will sharing their experience with us today. Each of our distinguished panelists will have up to 10 minutes to give a short presentation or share a thought from their work. And this will be followed by a moderated discussion and an opportunity for the panelists to respond to questions and reflection from the audience. First, we have Fabian. I don't know if you're right with us. Fabian Wiro Pranoto. Fabian ended his bachelor from the University of Twente in Netherlands. Over the past 5 years, Fabian has participated in several climate change adaptation and mitigation projects, including the IUCN Small Grants Biogas Initiative, Avina Foundation Base, and the Global EbA Funds, the EbA Enhanced Climate Field Schools. Currently, Fabian oversees a Surum Coast Restoration Project in North Bali, focus on agroforestry practice and degraded landscape. Next, we please welcome Marie-Lise Sarrazin. Marie-Lise Sarrazin has been a program officer at Equitas since December 2021. Before she joined Equitas, she worked at the Center for Alternative Indigenous Conservation and Development, CICADA, at McGill University, and at the Secretariat of the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity. Marilyn has also volunteered in Cameroon with PUS International. She holds a bachelor's degrees in international development studies and geography from McGill University, a master degree in geography and environmental studies from the University of Toronto, and a diploma in higher education pedagogy from UKAM. And join us today as well, we have Tadokolo Zungo. Okolo is a marketing and project manager with Alexandra Wota-Iwaris, who implemented the Alexandra Rivers Creator Series along with artists and scientists, poets, and the Johannesburg Inner City Partnership. Okolo has over 20 years of experience in branding growth, stakeholders engagement, and strategic project implementation across corporate governments and non-profits, but also fast-moving consumer goods sectors. He is working is focus on environmental justice and community empowerment, translating complex environment, social, and economic issues into relatable, actionable campaigns that inspire change. Okul also attended the University of Maryland and is passionate about empowering youth and women in environmental leadership spaces. I don't know if Okul is already with us. I cannot see. Can someone confirm? Okay. And the next, hi, she's with us. And the next we have Marianne Stella. Marianne Stella Gala is a gender justice journey facilitator with the conservation and sustainable management of coastal and marine ecosystem project based in Kilifi, Kenya. And she is a passionate and result-driven social work and community development professional with extensive experience in youth engagement, mentorship, facilitation, and data collection. She has contributed to impactful programs with organizations such as EbA Foundation, Plan International Kenya, Mercy Corps, and SOS Children Village. Marian is skilled in participatory approach, gender justice advocacy, and program coordination with a strong commitment to inclusive development. And her leadership has driven youth-focused initiatives promoting equity, empowerment, and community transformation. To completing our storytelling sessions today and this second session, we have Daniel Alexandre Rodriguez. He is an environmental engineer specialized in natural risk management with master degree in interdisciplinary studies in economic, environmental, and social sustainability, focusing on industrial and urban ecology. Currently, he is a technical assistant in ecosystem-based adaptation at IUCN South Office, where he is part of the EbA program, supporting the implementation of adaptation strategies in Latin America, especially in Ecuador. Before joining IUCN, he worked at FAO on the formulation of the second National Determined Contribution, NDC, in the human settlement sectors, and he was part of the ProRed project team focused on disaster risk management for the World Food Program. He is also founder of Teresa's Produtivas, an initiative to strengthen urban agro-food system, and has actively participated in community government of the Santa Clara in San Samilan community. He has been also a grantee of Senesti and several scholarship program, in addition with to winning competition for the development of urban ideas with environmental and food approach, achieving publications in blogs and magazines. So we see today this area. Today we had about on the first session about how justice-based and community-led action, climate and natural solution centers equity and real world impact. Now you will hear directly from 5 individuals doing just that. They will share short, vivid reflections from their work and lived experience. So these stories highlight not only the challenge, but also the hope, resilience, and transformation that come when communities lead climate and natural solutions. So we invite all of you to listen closely, learn from their approach, and hear their potential challenge and reflect on their work. So to start our sessions, I would like to invite our speakers to make their presentation, but please remember that you have 10 minutes for your intervention. So to kick us off, let's begin with our first speaker, that is Fabian. Please, Fabian, can you, Fabian, please tell us about your work with Sure Kosei and the Global Ecosystem-Based Adaptation Fund. So, Fabian, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Carla. Hi, good evening, everyone, or evening from my time right now, which is 10:45 p.m. and maybe good morning or good afternoon to all you all. Thank you for introducing me. So my name is Fabian. I'm a researcher at SureCo, short for Sustainability and Resilience, and we are also a partner of SEI Asia, also known as Stockholm Environment Institute, based in Bangkok, that we did a project together under the Global EbA Fund. May I share my screen, or is this the...
What if I told you your choice?
You can go through this video. So I think we may not have time to go through the whole video, and or is the audio seems to function well. If within the 10 minutes, this is a 2-minute video, I think we can play this video. And I guess before playing the video, I just want to have a very quick introduction about the context that I'm presenting. And so the video you're about to watch is part of the Global EbA funded project called ECLAIR, or EbA Enhanced Climate Field Schools for Climate Resilience. And it is about tackling the problem of vulnerable groups, which are coffee farmers, in the face of climate change, with the solution being a co-development or co-creation of programs together with the communities. That being said, I think you can play the video. Or could someone help me just click the play button again? Yes.
Hi, Fabian. I think we're going to just move on with the presentation instead of the video of that. Thank you.
That works. Sure. So that being said, the point of the program was that in our approach we had three solutions in place, or three solutions that have been executed before, but in different contexts. And so we had capacity building programs designed for rice farmers. We call this the climate field schools. We had a agroforestry project in theory, and then we also had biogas digesters as part of a climate mitigation and adaptation solution. And so the idea is, how do we package this into a community-based learning and into something that is beneficial for farmers to reduce their vulnerabilities to climate change? Over to the next slide. Yes. So this the image you see right here is what we call the climate field schools, which we executed 6 times over the course of 2 years with different communities across Bali and the Flores Islands. And in these field schools, what you're seeing right now is exactly the moment where we analyze the tree species and the coffee species that are currently not surviving very well in long drought seasons, or in this case the El Nino year where it was really dry. So in the climate field schools, we collaborate with extension workers, agriculture extension workers, with BMKG, which is the Met Office, the climatology office in Indonesia, to provide the right climate information for farmers so that we know when it is the end of rainy season or when it is the start of rainy season. Indonesia being in the equator, we basically rely on 2 seasons, and most farmers are rain-fed, meaning it really matters when the start of rainy season and what the end of it is for agricultural practices. And so during the field schools, what we did in this project was to integrate more traditional local knowledge. We have 2 rounds of field schools, the first round being more focused on introductory EbA and introductory climate field school curriculum, where we learn about climate change. But then we also have a focus group discussion within the field school itself to truly dig into the actual concerns and the problems being faced by the communities. And then the second round of field school started, which introduced the topics that have been requested by said communities, including soil analysis, understanding the tree species, and understanding the local native shade species that can be integrated as part of the system. And this is what we call the agroforestry system. So by the end of every field school, what happens is we have an adaptation plan that we created together with the farmers and the agriculture extension workers, basically teaching farmers how to interpret climate knowledge into knowledge that they can execute day to day, meaning translating climate information into day-to-day adaptation plans, which could simply mean planting 1 month later than it usually is because of the changes in climate variability. And so the climate field schools is in a way a fixed curriculum, a fixed objective, but the content in itself has always been community-based. It has always been decided by the communities. Next slide. And so what comes after the adaptation plan is what we call the agroforestry component of the project, which is basically the adaptation plan of the climate field schools. What we learned from most coffee farmers in Indonesia is that given that it is so vulnerable to climate change, what is needed is a system that is not of monoculture, which we learn to be the main reason why it's vulnerable in the first place, and to understand the right species that could handle the various changes in climate. And so what we did was we created a coffee agroforestry demonstration plot, which is heavily based on local knowledge, specifically not only the shade species and the native species that are around the forest or around the area, but also conducting the planting session using a traditional method. And what I mean by traditional method in this case is a traditional ceremony. Well, so in one of the locations where we conducted the agroforestry demonstration plot, the demonstration plot wasn't just a planting ceremony where we dig and plant. In fact, we had a whole religious and spiritual ceremony conducted with the traditional village head and the indigenous people to conduct a proper ceremony where we bless the land, we call on the ancestors, and we fully take ownership, or we fully take responsibility in maintaining the land and restoring the land through agroforestry, which in the end brought more attention to the village and brought more attention to the local communities to acknowledge how important this demonstration plot was, instead of just showcasing and planting the things we think is right, which is based on agroforestry principles. In fact, a lot of agroforestry EbA principles needed to adjust to what the locals have been doing or what the local communities have done to make it inclusive. And so there's a lot I can talk about here, which is simply the types of shade species and why agroforestry is considered an ecosystem-based adaptation, which is basically providing multiple ecosystem services apart from being a nature-based solution, apart from being a mitigation solution, and connecting back to the climate field schools, this agroforestry program was also requested by the community, as a lot of the farmers that have been familiar with agroforestry have not been equipped with the right knowledge to maintain an agroforestry system. And this is solved during the second round of climate field school when we conducted the traditional ceremony and when we conducted the demonstration plot, which is why it's, again, back to the name itself, it's called the climate field school. It is supposed to be done in the field. It was not a capacity building program that was intended to bring people to a classroom in a room with a projector, which is done in the first round, but the focus is actually the field, the observation in the field, understanding what is actually needed and what type of climate information, how that can be translated. And in a way, it is more important for us in this program to make sure the community understand how to interpret climate knowledge than to know exactly how climate change and everything works. It is mostly about how they can adapt. Next slide. Yes. So, I mean, the video is playing anyway, but so this is just a demonstration of one of our technologies, which is the biogas digester, which you will see in 5 seconds. This white pillow-shaped sheet, which is filled with cow manure and pig manure. It is a technology that ASHERCO have developed in the last 5-8 years, and we integrated it in this project because we found the necessity of not only turning unused livestock waste into something useful, but also to reduce the firewood, the use of firewood as cook stoves in rural Indonesia. So another layer to the problem that I have not discussed in terms of the vulnerability of farmers, a lot of you may have known already that in rural Southeast Asia, a lot of the responsibilities of collecting firewood is in women and children. If I can share as many videos as I can in this presentation, I would have shared those videos of women and children carrying firewood as part of their daily routine. And indoor house pollution is one of the most detrimental. It has a lot of detrimental effects to the health, and those who are most prone to these health risks are women, as they spend time cooking, burning firewood indoors in the kitchen, and so this became a solution.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you have about 1 minute to wrap up.
Yeah. So, because of that, biogas became an essential component in this project, because we wanted to reduce this firewood collection in the forest areas, and also for the farmers to provide fertilizers from the biogas digester itself. So all of this, I can explain the process of targeting biogas digester users, which is decided with the communities who needs the biogas digester, what criteria there are criteria on who can receive the biogas digesters, and we provide it for free in this project. Next slide, and to conclude. And so I think the main takeaways, which there's a lot of takeaways, but the ones that I can summarize right now is that from this program, what we focused a lot was on the upstream side. And this is a lot about climate change and the field and the farms, and how we can reduce the vulnerabilities there. And for our next step, and how we can design more inclusive programs for women as well, is to generate more economic evidence of community-led EbA, meaning focusing on the downstream, focusing on the marketing, focusing on how we can sell the farmer products, or NTFPs, non-timber forest products. And lastly, and I think the most important part of this presentation, is to acknowledge that many communities have already their own ways and systems and methodologies of nature-based solutions of EbA. We're just right here now labeling them as NBS and EbA to fit into the climate adaptation context, but in reality, a lot of these communities already thrive and already have their own methods, and it's about enhancing them with the right current information so that they can adapt to the changing climate. And meaning, circling back to the capacity building, a true community-led capacity building is not just shoving random climate data into their throat, but really understanding how this climate data can be interpreted well to be co-developed together with their existing systems. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Fabian, to share with us your experience, to talk about the climate field schools that have been promoted. It was good to hear that this climate field schools is integrated more traditional knowledge, and you are using the participatory approach to develop the local adaptations plans. And it's good that also the contents of these schools is community-based, and also that you have try to keep all those traditional cultural habits. So now let's hear from our second panelist, that is Marine Line. Marine Line, I understand that you would like to discuss how the project Women of Forest has used human rights education to kickstart the transformative societal change. So, over to you, Maria.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais présenter en français si ça vous va. Donc, merci de me donner l'opportunité de parler un peu de nos activités dans le projet Femmes Pro Forêt. Donc, le projet Femmes Pro Forêt, c'est un projet d'adaptation.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak about this project of adaptation to climate change with women and young people in Guinea, and it's developed by an international institution, also in cooperation with other organizations. And Equitas is also present, which is the organization I work for. It's a Canadian institution which promotes justice and dignity across programs. So today, I would like to explain to you how we apply this approach in favor of women and in the fight against climate change while contributing to governance. It's a social transformation process through the development of new behaviors and knowledge and through the implementation of both collective and individual actions for against discrimination. We are touching on the heart of inequalities, and also promoting the visibility of human beings, because ours is an human rights approach, and also this is cross-sectional at this specific program. And I'm going to speak about the human rights components, but I could deal with these into more detail, of course. And this means that we've got to insist on the active participation of everyone, especially the groups which are most intensively affected by women and men living in national parks, and linking that with the human rights, especially in terms of dangers against dangers for the environment and the people. Also highlighting how people can deploy an active participation in this fight against climate change. That entails insisting on projects at which people themselves would defend their rights while integrating the principles of equality and non-discrimination around the whole of the actions, while ensuring security and transparency on the side of governments and companies. As it was said before during the introduction, a human right approach, of course, takes on the one side people, but on the other side, activities which are insisting on the approach itself. As you may see here in the picture, it's a workshop for women and the creation of awareness on climate change. And it was developed for more than 500 women living in the national park. The participatory approach is based on the people and people who learn, and the objective is to highlight the knowledge of people based on mutual respect and the involvement of the participants on the workshop themselves. The monitors, the teachers are considered to be co-participants and also co-learners. The main aim of this workshop was to speak about climate change and groups and link it up with the subject of human rights of these groups, and starting on the knowledge of women, considering the challenges and the changes they have already gone through. Starting from experience, we would define what climate change is, and for that we used a map. You may see it on the picture on screen. And what was shared from the workshops, they could listen to information on the occurrence of droughts, and women identified the presence of less water in the rivers, also a problem of the availability of water for farming, the increase of the amount of work in terms of the collection and gathering of water, and also problems with regards to the availability of water at some wells. Of course, it's linked to the right for health, because there's no drinking water at the health centers, for example. Also, the right, we would bring to light how girls were taken away from schools because they were put to help and the people who got sick in the families. And at these workshops, these ladies pinpointed the types of situations which were already affecting them. It was important to highlight the knowledge, the learning of these women, and also the building of local solutions fully adapted to the experience lived. And this allows the reinforcement, or makes it possible to reinforce their the point of view, the visibility of the points of view, because they explain the daily experiences, the day-to-day experiences, and at the same time, it came as a sort of legitimization, because when we speak and we refer to climate change, they can say that they have an experience in that field and that they have got a role to play through solutions they can identify and share. Then maybe we can go on to the next slide. I would like to speak to you to educational activities in terms of generating influences. We went a bit further on in terms of the reinforcement of leadership, and it was dedicated to young women who had participated in the workshops who wanted to create an even more safe space, a safer space, so they could make claims in the wake of the fight for the rights. Also, this training took civil society into account, because these women from the communities could be supported by actors playing a role beyond the actual community. So we're referring to more permanent changes. They represented either civil society or organizations working for the rights of women that maybe are not so much involved in environmental issues, or the other way around. Peasants who are not used to developing approaches running around human rights. So how could we work with the affected people, with women living in the national park, to support their claims before the authorities and act as a loudspeaker for their message? So once again, we tried to use role play, so young women and the representatives of the organizations developed a defense action plan which helped them identify their priorities in terms of the changes they would like to take place in the place of origin. And this is the last slide. We concluded the training with activities, networking activities, and women were invited to showcase their initiatives before representatives of organizations who could in turn speak about the feasibility of developing their initiatives they described. Some of them explained that their priority was access to drinking water, and they were looking for support so they could bring their case before the authorities. Another great challenge was having the right for food and water and create awareness among the communities, so deforestation was prevented. And also, of course, the educating people on the use of adequate farming practices. So inadequate practices were dismissed. I don't know if we have time for the videos, because otherwise, well, I could conclude anyway. All right. To conclude, maybe next step would entail, now that young women organizations saw that they could be listened to, now we want to make sure that people with committed with the fight of for the defense of human rights will mean creating spaces with representatives of the national park or public officers, so they can be aware of the responsibility they have towards the protection of the rights of human beings. And we will be concluding with a forum on the rights of women, which will gather together women from participating communities and, of course, the interested parties. So a forum for dialogue is open, and true commitment is generated in terms of promoting the situation of people in Guinea and the fight for their rights.
Okay, thank you, Marilyn, to share with us what the work have been done on Women for Forest. It was good to hear that you have been, the organization you've been provide the leadership capacity for women, so it can help us to have them in terms of having formal and active participation on different forums related with the use and management of natural resource. That's good. So next, we welcome Okole. We are excited to hear about the Alexandria Water Warriors and its work in San Casa. So Okole, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Carla. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here today at the Nature, Climate and Gender Symposium representing the SUNCASA project. The SUNCASA project, the acronym for SUNCASA stands for Scale Urban Nature-Based Solutions for Climate Adaptation in Sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm here today to share an inspiring and transformative initiative taking place along the Yaske River in Alexandria Township, Johannesburg. As many of you know, flooding is one of Johannesburg's most persistent climate challenges. In Alexandria, where the Yaske River runs through densely populated and underserved communities, flooding leads not only to loss of life, but also to the destruction of homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure. Among the many causes of this flooding, the accumulation of solid waste in stormwater systems and waterways plays a significant role. It's clear that for our communities to become more resilient, we must explore innovative and sustainable approaches to managing waste in our urban water bodies. One such innovation is the SUNCASA Litter Trap and Art Project, a beautiful fusion of environmental science and creative expression. This project began when David Van Nerken, the CEO of Johannesburg Inner City Partnership, visited the site of the first litter trap developed and installed by Alexandria Water Warriors along the Yaske River. At the time, it was a basic functional structure, not very attractive, but it sparked in him a vision to reimagine the river as a green corridor, a place of community engagement, tourism, and environmental restoration. That vision laid the groundwork for commissioning renowned South African artist and environmental scientist, Hanale Kutia, who brought together a local team to transform this idea into a living, breathing project. At the heart of this transformation was a series of community-based workshops held in Alexandria during the foundational phase of the project. These workshops were not simply information sessions, they were collaborative co-creation spaces that brought together a rich tapestry of knowledge systems, including scientific insight, indigenous ecological wisdom, artistic expression, and lived community experience. Next slide, please. Through a powerful collaboration with the City of Johannesburg, JICP, World Resource Institute, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and Global Affairs Canada, the SUNCASA project led to the installation of 5 litter traps, each one more than just a barrier for debris, and 8 striking sculptures. These traps became anchors for culturally activated public spaces, combining utility with meaning and offering the community something to gather around and learn from. Next slide, please. As you see, that's one of the sculptures that we have there. Alexandria Water Warriors played a critical, felicitative, and community-driven role in the creation of the SUNCASA River Creature series. As local environmental stewards deeply embedded in Alexandria, We were instrumental in mobilizing community participation during the foundational workshops that shaped the project's vision. AWW helped bridge the gap between science, artistic, and indigenous knowledge systems by ensuring that local voices and lived experiences were meaningfully included in the co-creation process. This involvement enabled the project to be culturally grounded and contextually relevant. Alexandra Water Warriors also supported the identification of symbolic creatures, such as the goat, crab, root man goose, the one you see on the slide, bird, and a water monitoring spirit, ensuring they reflected both ecological themes, highlighting the role played by the urban wildlife in preserving the river, and local biodiversity and cultural significance for the people of Alexandra. In short, our role was vital in grounding the project in local relevance, fostering ownership, and translating the initiative into a sustainable, community-led involvement. Next slide, please. At the heart of this initiative is a focus on sustainable urban living driven not just by innovation, but by inclusion. A particularly powerful dimension of Symposium, it's the gender equity and social inclusion component, which is the justice component. One standout example is the partnership with the Kula Foundation, an organization that has mastered the skill of weaving recyclable materials into litter traps. Kula worked closely with AWW and the artists to create litter traps using weaved materials, demonstrating a tangible model of the circular economy in action. In fact, Kula is currently the only organization in South Africa capable of producing litter traps from recyclable materials, and they've begun to sell them, generating green livelihoods and empowering the women in Alexandra. The Symposium River Creature Series has contributed significantly to community resilience by transforming Alexandra's community relationships with its river system. By turning polluted, flood-prone zones into culturally vibrant and educational spaces, the project empowers residents to become more active custodians of their environment. The artistic litter traps do more than just capture waste. They symbolize a cleaner, safer, and more hopeful future. Moreover, the justice component, particularly the collaboration with Kula Foundation, the project has created green economic opportunities, especially for the women and marginalized groups. This directly addresses systematic inequalities while promoting the circular economy. From an environmental justice standpoint, the project ensures that underserved communities like Alexandra are not just recipients of a top-down intervention, but co-creators of solutions. It restores dignity, promotes ecological equity, and builds a stronger, more inclusive urban ecosystem. Next slide, please. The Litter Traps and Art Project is a living testament to what can happen when innovation meets community, when environmental science collaborates with artistic expression, and when inclusion becomes a design principle rather than an afterthought. It is not just a project, it is a movement towards cleaner rivers, safer communities, and an urban future where no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Okole, for sharing with us what the project Symposium have been done in Alexandria. And it was good to listen that we were managed to scale up natural-based solutions for climate adaptation. And it's also interesting to listen that also you managed, this is a project that managed to bring the local voice to co-create a process on the community that they are based. So those are accuse them of community-led involvement. So now I would like to invite Mariam. So please take the floor and tell us about how COSME is piloting new approach gender justice journey. Marianne, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I greet you warmly and I welcome all of you. My name is Mariam, as introduced, Mariam Salah. I am a gender justice facilitator with Plan International Kenya, working on the COSME project, which stands for the conservation and sustainable management of coastal and marine ecosystems. Gender justice is a project that works in three intercontinental nature-based solutions for climate adaptation and biodiversity conservation, which are mangrove restoration, sustainable seaweed farming, and locally led forest management. We implement the project in partnership with Jane Goodwill Institute Canada and Cascadia Seaweed in Kenya and Tanzania's cross-border coastal regions. I, along with 65 gender justice facilitator, we facilitate groups of women in Kilifi and Kwale, working closely with male counterpart of facilitators that facilitate the journey of men of these women that we facilitate. The gender justice journey is a methodology being piloted by the COSME project to address the barriers of women agencies, such as from personal to household level to the social, and addressing barriers such as internalized feeling that she is less deserving of equal rights, and her burden of care, her isolation, and her exclusion from planning, decision-making, and leadership roles. We do this by taking her husband, and the peers on a journey toward gender and ecological justice, which involves story, activity, discussions, skill buildings, and reimagining that is sometimes done in segregated groups and sometimes with women and men as a group, lead ultimately to household action plan. Today, I invite you with me to journey alongside Fatuma. Fatuma, who comes from an underdeserved community in Takaungo. She dropped out of school at the age of 13, not because she was not smart, but generally because education was not deemed necessary in her community, leading to her dropping out at the age of 13. By the age of 25, by the age of 17, she was married off, and by the age of 25, she was a mother of 3. She, in that community, like many other, they have been tailored to believe that they are just meant there to serve, to obey, and to live under without being noticed. So generally, Fatuma begins her journey with us, and we take her through with alongside the husband that is being coached by the male counterpart of us, and she lives with the husband. Previously, while attending the sessions, we have a conjoined session that will involve the presence of her and the husband, but even whenever the sessions just needed her, the husband will still accompany her, and she will not come alone. She will come with the children, since she was the person that's supposed to look after the children. That is what has been deemed for her. So she will come with at the session with the kids and the company of the husband, but she will just sit at the back not answering any question, not participating. But during the session, one of the session, she just stood up and she decided that whatever is happening in her community, she doesn't want that to be happening to her daughter who was just beside her. So she said she wanted her daughter to have choices that she didn't have. It's since then that Fatuma began taking commitment in the session, taking leadership, taking initiative in appreciating, in giving her opinion, in taking matters and making relationships and adapting to positivity in her life. So we now see Fatuma implementing and being with other women and acting as involving structural and societal, such as the engaging with the local chiefs and standing against the injustice social norms. Respectfully but firmly, she will give out her point, and in return, we see that it's through the session that she has been through. We see her having a good relationship both with the husband, with the family members, and at the structural level, we see Fatuma implementing and being part of the decision-making committee in her village. And a change that is very noticeable is that now Fatuma comes on her own. The children are left at home, which means she has time for herself. Their shared responsibility, which equals to her having more time to herself and participating in the ecological system and in the climate resilience. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Mariam, to share with us what your project has been done. I can see that you also is an initiative that bring also a family approach, because in some initiatives the women can also with the husband. Now, last but not least, I'd like to invite Danielle. We would love to hear about your work on ecosystem-based adaptation in Latin American and Caribbean region. Danielle, the floor is yours. You are muted, Danielle.
Sí, perdón. Hola, hola a todos y todas.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Pasar la diapositiva.
Can we change
Quiero
slides?
compartirles una historia
I'd like to
real
share with
sobre
you a
indígenas de
real
la
story,
tierra,
a
el agua y
story
las voces de comunidades que
embroidered
enfrentan
from
cada
the
día
land,
los
water,
impactos
and the
del cambio
voices of
climático en
communities
América Latina
which
y el
suffer
Caribe.
the impact of
Mi
climate
nombre es Daniel
change in Latin
Rodríguez,
America.
soy
My name is Daniel Rodriguez.
científico
I'm a
de
technical
adaptación basada en
assistant
ecosistemas
for
de la IUCN y la Fundación y soy parte del
ecosystem
programa EbA una
adapted
iniciativa
solutions, and
financiada por ICI
I'm
y
part
fomentada por
of
GIZ,
the EbA
IUCN y
LAC
GATIE,
initiative
junto con los ministerios
implemented
del
by
ambiente de
CATIE,
Ecuador,
UICN,
Guatemala y
and
Costa Rica. Hoy
GIZ,
quiero
together with the
contarles la
governments
historia
of
de
Ecuador,
mi país,
Guatemala, and Costa Rica.
Ecuador.
I want to
Desde
speak to
agosto de
you to tell you a
2021,
story
este programa trabaja
on
para
Costa
estimular
Rica.
el enfoque
Since
de
August
adaptación basada en
2021,
ecosistemas,
this project
y con
is
ello fortalecer la
approaching
resiliencia de
the
comunidades y ecosistemas rurales a
resilience
caminos
of
de mejorar
ecosystem
su calidad.
and vulnerable
Puedes pasar.
local ecosystem. Can we change slides, please?
Diapositiva.
Can we change slides, please?
Eso.
All
En
right.
Ecuador,
In
aplicamos este enfoque
Ecuador,
de
we
manera
apply
integral, como lo
this
que llamamos
comprehensive
adaptación al
approach
cambio
in
climático
terms
basado en
of
ecosistemas o ABCA.
ecosystem-based
Lo hacemos a
climate
través de 4
adaptation,
pilares. Primero,
or the eBay
fortaleciendo la
LAC, and we
gobernanza en
do
todos
it
los niveles.
based on 4
Segundo,
pillars. By
implementando
promoting multi-level
y
governance.
escalando medidas
Second, by
clave con
implementing
enfoques con
ABE
actores locales.
measures
Tercero,
with
desarrollando
local
capacidades
actors.
adaptativas.
Third,
Y
by
cuarto,
developing
creando
adaptation
mecanismos financieros
abilities,
que
and
permitan
4,
sostener estas
creating
medidas.
financial
Pero
mechanisms
esta
which support
historia
these
también viene de un territorio.
tools. But this story is also
No puedes ir
based
a la
on a
diapositiva.
territory. Can we change slides, please?
también tiene un territorio. El corazón del
So,
trabajo
so
del
say,
Ecuador está en la
saying
provincia
the heart of the work
en el
takes
norte del
place in the
país.
province of
Ahí
Manabí,
el
in the
programa
coastal
interviene
region
en
of the
dos
country.
principales
And
paisajes.
the
El
program is
paisaje
active on
norte
3
incluye
main
sectores
landscapes.
como
Northern
Rita, Ángel
landscapes
Pedro
includes
Ferrer, Bachiller,
sectors such as Bachillero, Ángel Pedro Ferrer, the state of Canton, Funí, and Quiroga, and the southern landscapes where places such as Chiripo, Honorato Vázquez, and Membrillal are located. Some of these areas, such as Honorato Vázquez and Membrillal, consolidate the learning taken from prior projects. There was a geospatial analysis made with local agents, and that validation is a part of the approach. Solutions are not coming from outside. They are built with the people living on the ground. And on these landscapes, we have joint efforts with more than 80 stakeholders, community stakeholders, and we have jointly developed 10 measures based on ecosystem with a transformative approach, which includes the gender and human rights perspectives. And we have strengthened planning tools, governance spaces, local capacities, and proposals for integrative financial tools. Can we change slides, please? But what is the type of measures I'm referring to? The solutions go from sustainable management of water, the preservation of the land, and the restoration of ecosystem, and productive initiatives such as bamboo farming, bee culture, and the strengthening of sustainable value chains. The guideline is the improvement of the ways of living of people. So we want to reduce vulnerabilities of the people and strengthen the hydrological security in communities where these conditions were weak. And there is where the gender approach becomes key, because we do not use it as a social variable, but as a transformational lever. Around 40% of people participating agents are either women, young people, or people belonging to traditionally marginalized groups. This has enriched the ways in which people think and act on resources. And we have developed specific tools, for example, affirmative mechanisms for guarantee integration, gender-sensitive monitoring tools, tools adapted to the local context. And with that, we do not just strengthen climate governance, but also self-governance of communities. I would like to refer to Manabí now. It's a province which is strongly affected by climate change. Intense rain, long droughts, loss of ecosystems, deforestation, and unsustainable farming practices. On top of that, there's the problem of insecurity and the pressure over traditional productive activities, such as access to water or traditional farming. So we work with 7 districts, Bolívar, Puerto Viejo, Titicaca, etc. And there, these 10 measures are being implemented. All of them designed with a territorial and gender approach. And the results are blunt in positive terms. We have more than 142 family farms which have reinforced family income. About 72% of farmers are women who now count on additional sources of income. And more than 3,000 people have taken part in skill building processes, restoration projects, strengthening the skills and productive abilities. More than 2,700 hectares have benefited from these measures. Agroforestry seed banks have been established, and sustainable bamboo management system were put in place. Also, actions for the preservation of micro basins. All of them oriented towards strengthening the economic resources. But the most significant, the most important thing allowed women, men, and young people to share responsibilities. They redistributed care time for the family and assume a more fairer decision-making process. Women who did not speak their voice before, now take part in fairs, again, access to financial resources and speak in decision-making forums. Also, women have diversified their sources of income, and now they are much more aware and they are stronger. Please, let's change slides. Stronger in financial terms. And we have learned a lot. We learned that inclusion is designed from the start, from baseline, that projects, including gender, the gender dimension, have a more sustainable impact. We also learned that gender approach is not an isolated box. It's a tool which strengthens the social tissue, legitimizes local knowledge, and improves nature-based decision-making. And roles are redistributed, new leaderships appear, and intergenerational alliances appear. And when these actions are linked with the forms of life, the impact becomes durable, because this transforms not just the territory of the land, but also the narrative, the people, its source, belong in the sense of belongings, and it left skills among the people which are still active, because when the communities take the lead, rights are defended and resilience is shared and becomes efficient and tangible.
Thank you, Daniel, for sharing with us the work that we've been done, the tools and approach that we've been using in order to ensure that climate governance at local level is that agenda are responsive. Now, I would like to thank all the speakers for those powerful insights and thought-provoking presentation. So we now have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. And I would like to open the floor to the audience for questions or reflections. So please feel free to raise or to use the chat or QR function if you would like to contribute, and I will do my best to ensure that we answer as many as time allows us. So I don't know, I would like to request also support from my colleagues, because I cannot see all the questions. I don't know if there is already some questions, because on the beginning I saw just comments. If you know why people start digesting what they have listened from the different panelists, I would like to start with small questions. Maybe I can start with Mary Lane. If he could explain us how has human rights education enabled the Femme for Forest project to identify inclusive and transformative courses of actions for adaptation to climate change?
Thank you.
Mary Lane,
Yes.
And I would like to ask you if you could speak slow, so
yes,
we can
sorry.
have time for the translators to
Yes, sorry. I'll try also
what you're saying.
to answer in English, so to change the
okay.
the burden of translation. But I think, as was briefly explained in the presentation, using human rights education means that you start with the experience of everyone and in an inclusive way, and so it allows to hear everyone's voices, empowers everyone to be able to defend their rights, but also their interests, their priorities, their solutions. And so in the project, because it's the approach we used when working with communities, it means that we were able to identify priority actions for everyone in communities, and it will be a more durable or sustainable, actually would be the right translation. There's a more sustainable action. And so this way, and it's a slow work, but it allows to include everyone by working specifically with groups that are usually a bit less involved in decision making. So to make sure that they using a right-based approach means that it's hard to justify exclusion and discrimination. And so we do hope that by using human rights education as part of what is a more climate or biodiversity project, we're able to make sure that people's rights are at the center of all the actions, and that climate action is impacting everyone in a more just way. And that everyone's voice is at the table. That's at the center of the objective of using a human rights-based approach. Yeah, I hope it answered the question briefly.
You're muted, Carla.
Sorry. So I was saying that now, thank you to Mary-Lise, and I was saying that now we go to Mariam. We know that the gender justice journey methods is just a pilot, but so far the response has been positive based on what you have mentioned during this session. So can you give us one more or two examples of what the participants like about it?
So among the one or two of the things that they like is the fact that this approach involves both the man and the woman, which means it's a household approach. So basically, the change doesn't happen one-sided. It's a change that comes from within. It comes from the family household level to the community level, and then to the getting to the structural, to still to the ecological. So a lot of planning that they were not initially not involved, now that they are being involved because their counterpart understand the importance in their of their involvement is what the community really appreciate about this piloting.
Thank you, Marianne. I would like to go now to Fabian. We listen the experience that we have been done in another contest. We know that every contest is unique, but good ideas often travel well. So what lessons from your experience could benefit others working in different regions? Fabian, this is for Fabian. I don't know if he's still online.
Yes, I'm still online. Could you repeat the last part of the question?
No, I was saying that we know that every contest is unique, but ideas often travel well. So what lessons from your experience could benefit others working in different regions? As you explained, you are working in different, so how we can apply what we have been done, what lessons you can share with us, and that we can use in different regions from where you're now implementing your activities or your projects.
I may need to think about this one. Do I have to answer now?
No, if you don't have now, you can then answer, send us, and we can share with everyone, no problems. I don't know, colleagues that are with me online, if you still have questions on the chat, because from my side, I cannot see. There is a question.
There's one question from an audience member on how can we hold global institutions and national governments accountable when their climate strategies ignore local realities or reinforce extractive systems?
So I don't know who want to pick based on the questions that was made. If you feel that you're more related with these questions, feel free to answer. I can repeat because now I can see that how can we hold global institutions and national government accountable when their climate strategy ignore local realities or reinforce extractive systems? I don't know who want to pick this one. Well, I don't know. I don't. Yes,
I can
Mary.
try to offer something.
It
is okay.
And then Danielle. Yeah, you can start, Mary. Then we go to Danielle.
Thank you. Well, it's an important question and not an easy one to answer, but maybe one avenue. For sure, if individuals are empowered to know what the government are supposed to do in those strategies and how they're supposed to be consulting, then they're able to advocate for the change they want to see. So I think that empowerment, empowering individuals, communities to be able to make sure that governments are accountable, like they're able to make their voice heard is important. But then also being able to work with people in governments that are supposed to develop those climate strategies to let them know, yes, you have objectives that are related to reducing climate emissions, but also there are human rights obligations within the different environmental convention, be it climate change or biodiversity. And so those obligations needs to be also accounted in those strategies. And sometimes it's a bit of learning that needs to happen there. And having the space where those conversations can happen between governments, groups, organizations, and individuals that are related to how do we develop those strategies and how we implement them is really important. But I'll let Daniel continue.
Yo, bueno,
Well,
primero creo que es
first of all, I believe it's important, as Mari just mentioned, is to maintain an active conversation and communication channel. However, the other thing is to show experiences and to speak with the decision takers. The decision takers are in their office, they don't see it. We have to prove to the decision takers that so that they get more involved with the reality on the ground, on the territory. We just had an experience when we took a tour with the decision takers, which are because a very important part of our job is to work with the decision takers. So they told us, well, I have another notion, another view of what is ongoing on the ground. So it is very important always to be connected and also to invite the decision takers to small and larger events. And now regarding with other issues, with extractive issues, one can, when there's a state policy and a clear-cut governmental policy, there's no external force which will be able to go against it. However, we will be able to have our communities organized, and that is also one of our experiences within our project. Further on from the implemented measure, the people got involved, they continue to do things together. That social construction allows them to know that they're defending the territory. And that is quite important to understand the organization, not only from the implementation side and also to strengthen my territory and to have that voice, since there are many times people in certain rural territories, they lack that voice. However, they get empowered. As we stated earlier on, we said women, they didn't speak in public and now they have turned into leaders. That strengthens us and that allows us to other ways how to save our territory and to work in our territory.
Thank you, Daniel.
Muchas.
So I would like to, because of the interest of time, I would like to thank you, our incredible storytellers, that is Fabian, Marilyn, Okole, Mariam, Daniel, for sharing your profound insights and experience with us today. So your contributions have underscored the absolute necessity of integration justice at heart of all climate and natural solutions. And to our audience also for your engagement and reflection, we would like to thank you. So during this session, we have heard about powerful arguments for reframing our approach, recognizing the lived realities of frontline communities and actively working to dismantle systematic barriers. So this session has truly set a strong foundation for the rest of our symposium. And once again, massive thank you to our generous partners, the Global Affairs Canada, the German Ministry for Environment, Natural Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection, and also the International Climate Initiative, IC, and the government of Norway for their unwavering supporting. We'll now transition to our next segment. This is an inspiration video message award showing case climate, gender, and human rights in action. So please stay with us as Day One continues to offer powerful perspectives. Thank you to all.
Thank you so much, Carla. Thank you so much. And also thank you to our incredible storytellers today. We've definitely heard a lot of inspiring stories and projects that you've showcased. As Carla mentioned, your contributions have highlighted not only the challenges, but also the hope, resilience, and transformation that come when communities lead climate and nature solutions. And as Carla also mentioned, we will showcase another video soon. You may recall from Okule's presentation, one of the projects was Sunkasa, which has a strong emphasis on gender equity and social inclusion. And in the following, we would like to share more insights into this project with a short video showcasing climate, gender, and human rights in action. So please stay with us as Day One continues.
As a member of the community, I care a lot about my community, and I feel like being part of this economic and social growth, it helps because I don't only take care of me and my family, but I can take care of more other lives by sustaining the environment, keeping the environment clean and healthy.
Nitwicheza konsole abari njyewe nyiri iyi pepiniyeri aba narayishyizeho bitewe n'impamvu kugira ngo niteze imbere kandi ndimo ndareba mbigeraho kandi mfite n'abakozi nkoresha hari abakozi bahoraho mfite na agronome mfite n'abandi banyakabyizi baza gukora rero ari ukwiteza imbere kwanjye ariko nanone n'abandi ari cyo bibamarira mu miryango yabo bishyurira abana amashuri za mituweli ni byinshi bibafasha mu buzima akaba ariyo mpamvu nanayishyizeho kugira ngo twihaze mu ni ukwisobanukirwa mu gihe tugezemo n'abadamu nabo bashobora gukora ibintu nk'ibi narebye rero nanjye ngomba kuba nta bumwe mu babikora kandi bikagira n'abandi badamu bagenzi banjye kugira ngo biteze imbere hari benshi rero bifitiye akamaro nabo badamu bakaza tukabaha akazi bagakora kandi tukabishyura kugira ngo bafashe imiryango yabo.
waan amata shanii yoo ta'ellee akka karoora amata 10tti achi nuusiifamu murtaa'e hojiin kun baatitti ta'us baatitti 15 ta'us 15tti akka uummanni ittiin godda'amnetti hawaasni keenyallee gammadee akka gaara kana dalagu murtaa'e akka amata shanii amata 3 kan qabachuun taane ila akka amata karoora nuu bal'isanii karoorri isaa nuu qabamee hanga amata 10tti illee hawaasni keenya gammachuun akka dalagu yoon irraftee dalayde dalagattee irraa jiraatta nirraa faxarta jireenya keetillee achumaanuu namni dalagatuu fi kataa'u tokkoo miti deemtu ammoo fumarraas yoo ta'e mana anumara ta'e jechuudha. Yoo inni deebi'ee amma shiginyii tan habba takka dhaabee guddise akka nama lubbuu namaa takka guddiseeti. Faayidaa nuu qabdi jechuudha. Akka nama ilmoo namaa guddiseeti. Tajaajillee jala horonnee bishaan itti naannee.
But the Sangasa project is really driving the change that people are already working on, and that support will upscale the activities that were being done by the communities already on the ground, and to bring in the issue of social cohesion that we're looking for between communities as well as government representatives.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for sharing this compelling video as the Symposium project. Each of the projects we have learned about in this session truly shed light on nature and climate solutions grounded in justice and action. And now, as we approach the close of day one, which was aptly themed grounding in justice and action, I'd like to take a moment to recap some of the powerful insights and discussions we have learned and shared today. So we began our day with an inspiring opening where Veronica set the stage, followed by compelling keynotes from Stuart McGuinness from IUCN and Lucy Molenkai from the Indigenous Information Network. They emphasized the urgent need for equitable and effective solutions to our escalating climate and environmental crisis, highlighting the crucial role of gender equality, human rights, and Indigenous knowledge. Stuart powerfully reminded us that nature and people are one, and that Indigenous people have stewarded the land long before the term conservation became established, urging us to elevate and integrate Indigenous knowledge into all frameworks. Lucy underscored these perspectives and emphasized the need to overcome silos to ensure that no one is left behind. In our first session, we looked at a justice-based vision for climate and nature. And we heard from an exceptional panel who challenged us to center justice-driven approaches that intrinsically link ecological integrity with social equity. The discussion underscored the absolute necessity of integrating justice at the heart of all climate and nature solutions, emphasizing the lived realities of frontline communities and the importance of dismantling systemic barriers. Following that, in session 2, we just learned about some inspiring projects that integrate climate, gender, and human rights in action. And we've learned about reflections from the panelists' work. Their stories highlighted not only the challenges, but also the hope, resilience, and transformation that occur when communities are at the forefront of leading climate and nature solutions. We saw firsthand how inclusive design and local leadership shape outcomes, providing practical lessons for all of us. So throughout the day, a consistent thread has been the recognition that dominant narratives and decision-making spaces have often marginalized those most affected, particularly women, Indigenous peoples, and other marginalized communities. This symposium aims to challenge those narratives, foster cross-project connections and solidarity, and create synergetic and inclusive spaces for learning and exchange. We are working towards improving understanding of how climate change, gender, equality, human rights, and Indigenous knowledge are interconnected, and gain practical and innovative knowledge to apply rights-based approaches more effectively in our work. So, in summary, day one has truly set a strong foundation, underscoring that the future of climate and nature depends on the inclusion of Indigenous peoples and local communities, with full gender inclusion where women lead as equal partners. So as we conclude day one, I would like to provide you with a brief teaser of what to expect in day two, in intersectional struggles and practical tools. In day two, we will build on today's discussion by exploring the complex ways in which climate change affects different groups of people and providing practical tools for creating equitable solutions. We will begin with a session on Indigenous and local action, honoring the leadership of Indigenous peoples and local communities, and underscoring the importance of respecting Indigenous sovereignty, land rights, and traditional ecological practices. Following that, session 3, intersectional struggles and resistance, will delve into the compounding impacts of climate change on marginalized groups, discussing how intersectionality impacts both vulnerability and resilience. And finally, session 4, we will be another project showcase with a focus on frameworks, tools, and practices, where we will see some hands-on examples of methodologies and tools for integrating gender and rights-based frameworks into climate and nature. So with this, thank you so much, everyone, for your active participation and engagement. We look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow for another insightful and inspiring day, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.